So, I would like to address a misunderstanding that people are likely to have concerning the concept of having a quote unquote good voice. So, in the popular mind, some people are simply gifted with nice voices. Okay, so the idea is, well, there are simply some people who happen to have, who simply happen to have the sort of voice that is appropriate for making announcements, or for being a DJ, or for doing movie promotions. And there's a certain amount of truth in that, but there's also a very important confusion that is embodied in it, and I would like to clear it up. Generally, people who have quote unquote good voices, but who do not have intellects to match. Okay, so people who, have the vocal cords, as it were, but don't have intellectual abilities that are correspondingly good, those people tend to use falsetto voices. So, this is Casey Kasem, and I like to. They tend to use voices that have a kind of two-dimensional imitation quality. This is not always true, but actually it is kind of always true. I mean, so when you listen to movie trailers, there are only a few people who do movie trailers, and you would recognize the voices in question. Anyway, these people have that, godlike voice. And actually, I saw one of these people on a talk show, and he was kind of a moron, actually. And so, but his voice is good. But at the same time, what I noticed is that if you actually listen to him talk for any length of time, you find that his voice actually isn't all that good. It's good only in certain kind of restricted contexts. And when he is given a chance to free talk, you find that his voice actually isn't all that good. It's kind of like somebody who looks good when you take a picture of him, but when you see him moving around or when you see him from different angles, he turns out not to be that good. And the reason that his voice was not ultimately that good was that he actually doesn't have that much of a brain. And by the same token, the reason why really good opera singers, or really good singers of any kind, but let's just go with opera singers here for reasons that will become apparent. The reason why really good opera singers have really good voices, okay, is that they don't just have good voices. They have an absolute ton of musical ability. So there's a fantastic harpsichordist by the name of Igor Kipnis, and his father was this famous opera singer. And so people are likely to think, oh, well, people who do opera, singing is not like playing the piano, which I do professionally, by the way. And I also compose. But singing is not like playing the piano. Anyone can sing. Not everyone can play the trombone or the piano or whatever. That's actually not true. And if you listen to somebody who's really a pro and you listen to them sing, and then you listen to somebody who's not a pro, it's immediately obvious who is who. And the difference is not simply that the one person has good vocal cords, whereas the other is not. That's like saying that the difference between a good pianist and a bad pianist is that a good pianist has big hands, which is totally false. Horowitz had rather small hands, actually. The difference is that the difference is cognitive. The difference is intellectual. The difference has to do with, the ability to process, and then to process information of a certain kind, and then to articulate or embody that information in some kind of perceptible form. So that's why, not that Casey Kasem is a bad guy necessarily. I don't really know anything about him, but people seem to think that he has this wonderful voice, but the truth is that he has a falsetto voice. He has that Ronald Reagan kind of, well, I don't know, or this is Casey Kasem, and I'm gonna. He has that kind of that very imitable, that very easy to imitate voice, and the reason that he does not have a better voice, frankly, or the reason that he does not have an authentically good voice, as opposed to one that is, good for American Bandstand or whatever it is he did. That was not it. It was something similar, though. Actually, Dick Clark was a little better, but the reason that Casey Kasem does not have a genuinely good voice, frankly, is that he has he does not have that great of an intellect. I don't think he's a moron. I don't know very much about him, but I think in order to have a genuinely good voice, you actually your voice, you need to, your way of speaking has to become kind of informed by and suffused with intelligence, and that condition was not really met in Casey Kasem's case. I mean, no offense, and that's why his voice, though good, is good only in certain ways and in certain contexts. There's also another point that I would like to make, which is that some people can do imitations, but very few can. And this always kind of struck me because I naturally will do imitations. It will just, they'll just sort of happen. And, I can imitate anybody, not necessarily on the fly, although sometimes, but I can it just sort of happens. And what does this have to do with? Does it have to do with a random knack? There may be an element of that, but I think there's less of an element of that than people believe. I think that it has to do with a kind of childlike quality, not childishness, which actually is an affliction of adults. But a kind of childlike quality. There's a kind of openness, and there's also and incidentally, people who can genuinely laugh even as adults, and that's a very rare thing, sadly. But people who can genuinely laugh, not the kind of not sort of pro forma laughs, but actual laugh. People who can actually laugh are the same people who can do imitations. So, there are some apparent exceptions to this. I mean, there are some people who develop mimicry skills when they're kids, and then they become kind of adults who are dead inside, but they can still do imitations. But for the most part, the principle just stated holds. Anyway, so anyway, the phone rang and I was interrupted. But so it's generally presumed that neurosis is a condition of adults, and this is actually not true. Neurosis is a condition. Genuine neurosis is a condition of people who are still emotionally alive and have a kind of emotional pulpiness. What is a condition of adults is the sort of brittleness of, basically, are the characterological residues of what were once live neuroses. And the kind of people who are able to be genuinely neurotic and not just neurotic in the kind of hardened shtick relevant Woody Allen type way. Those kinds of people, the kind of people who actually still have these live emotional conflicts, are the same people who can actually have a good laugh, and they're the same people who can do impersonations, and they're the same people actually ultimately are able to express themselves, who have good voices, because they are the same, because they are able to, where there's actual emotional vitality, it is possible to infuse one's voice with that vitality. Now, that does not mean that one's voice is, I mean, people who are emotionally vital will express that fact in different ways, and only a small subset of those people do so by becoming voice-over people, or mimics, or speakers, or some such. Nonetheless, that is a way. In other words, one way that one's emotional vitality can express itself perceptibly is by informing one's voice, by giving it dimensions and nuances and so on and so forth. And I think to some extent, though this is probably a bit of an overstatement, or this is the sort of thing that's this is likely to be an overdrawn conclusion, but I think to some extent, it's, if one actually has a certain kind of vitality of character, it is to some extent inevitable that it will express itself in one's voice. But again, I'm not sure about that.